we've talked about biological causes of intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities. In this video, we're going to look at societal correlates, not necessarily causes, but things that can create an atmosphere where developmental disabilities are more likely to happen. So we're going to start by looking at societal characteristics and individual rights. So there's some terms we look at here. The first one is normalization. The idea that everybody has the right to live and work and play in the community. The more opportunities that you have to develop, the more likely you are to develop. You know, you've seen some children, for instance, that don't have intellectual disabilities that are very sheltered, and they don't have as strong language or as strong social skills because they haven't had the opportunity to use those skills. There's the issue of consent. Do I have enough intellectual disabilities to consent to the things that happen in my life? Or am I a passive person and not allowed to make decisions for myself? Competency. Do I have enough skill to be able to make informed decisions about myself? And then the extreme version of that is guardianship, where you have people whose cognitive abilities are so limited that by law other people are making their decisions for them. So we talked about normalization, and here's what we have for normalization. There was a philosopher named Nerja who came out of Scandinavia, and he talked about 8 planks of normalization, 8 parts of your life that can be interfered with by other people. So he says normalization means a normal rhythm of the day, that I should have a pattern in my day, that when I get up in the morning, I get up at about the same time every morning, and there are certain tasks that I do when I start my day. Back when people with disabilities lived in institutions, then their day, the rhythm of their day was tied to the convenience of the staff. And in some families it's that way. The person with a disability is kind of shuffled to the side till other people have time to deal with them. Normalization implies a normal routine of life. Again, like I said, there are things that I do every day. For me, every morning I get up, I go in the kitchen, I make myself eggs in a mug with strawberries and a tortilla and salsa, and then I go take my shower, brush my teeth, then I go in and I put on my makeup and I get dressed and I head out for my day. For a person with significant disabilities, do they have that kind of predictability in their lives? Normalization means a normal rhythm of the year. We just got off of break in between semesters. For some of you, summer means that you work rather than go to school. For people with disabilities, do they have that ability to have an actual predictable rhythm within their year, or is every month pretty much the same? Normalization calls for normal developmental experiences of the lifestyle. We've been talking in this class about Colton, and with Colton, he's 13 now, and his mother's very sad because the boys that he was in preschool with are now playing baseball, and he can't play baseball. And so he's missing a lot of friendship because of that. He's missing a lot of outdoor activities because of that. And his family is missing socialization because of that. Normalization calls for the valuing of individual choices. I was at a picnic for kids with developmental disabilities, and they were making hot hamburgers for the kids. And every hamburger they were putting ketchup, mustard, and pickles. And somebody said, well, what if the kid doesn't like mustard? It didn't occur to anybody to ask them what they wanted on their hamburger. Normalization means living in a bisexual world. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody in the world is bisexual. What it means is that there are men and women are different. And that needs to be valued. Some of you value that a whole lot. The point is, for people with disabilities, very often they're seen as being asexual, of not having those kinds of needs. Normalization calls for living, learning, and recreating in facilities similar to those others in the community enjoy. Is there any reason, for instance, why a kid with a disability can't go to your local swimming pool? Is there any reason why A child in your community can't play on the regular baseball team. Normalization means applying normal economic standards. If I work for a living, I should get paid for it, regardless of whether I have a disability. Okay, some other issues. You may not have ever thought about this, but people with developmental disabilities in the criminal justice system, they sometimes end up being suspects because they try to cover up for their disability, or they pretend to understand, or they don't understand, or they're overwhelmed, or they're upset. They say what they think the officers want to hear. They have trouble describing facts or details. They're the first to leave the scene of the crime and the first to get caught. They're also confused about who's responsible and may confess even though they're innocent. Also, people with developmental disabilities are more likely to be victims of crime. They're bullied. They're less likely to be able to report. They can be easily influenced and eager to please a person who's a criminal. They may not realize that being a victim is a crime. They may think the perpetrator is a friend. They may be unaware of how serious or dangerous the situation is. They could not be considered a credible witness. They have few ways to get help. They don't have a safe place to go to. Okay, another issue has to do with right to treatment. And we talk about levels of support. So for some people, the kind of support they need is intermittent. What that means is that from time to time, situations come up where the person needs help. There's a man who is in his 40s, and he lives at the end of my driveway in an apartment, and he has a developmental disability, and he lives independently, and he lived in an apartment across town. And some of you may remember this. There was a woman who was living next door to him, and she came home from work one day, and there was a man waiting for her, and he sliced her up very badly, and she survived, but it was a horrific crime. And my neighbor, the man who's my neighbor now, was so unhinged by that kind of danger that they had to get him out of there and find another place to live. And so his family, who pretty much let him live independently, had to come in and help him. They had to help him find another place to live. They had to help him do what was necessary to move into this new place and to get him settled in. Once they got him settled in, then he was independent again. Limited support has to do with somebody who needs support on a fairly regular basis, but it's minimal support. So for instance, again, going back to the example of Dean, Dean has help with his finances, but he lives by himself, and he does his own housekeeping, and he does his own cooking and cleaning and so on, but he needs somebody to help him with finances, and so that is limited support. Extensive support is where you need help every day for certain aspects of your life. So for instance, again, I can use the example of Dean. He doesn't drive, so because of that, he needs help with transportation when the weather's bad. But there are other people, if we look at Colton, for example, he needs pervasive support. He needs support just to get around every moment of his day. Okay, another issue when we look at, if I can get this thing to do what I want it to do, another issue that we look at when we are looking at people with disabilities is we look at what's called person-centered planning. And so what that is we want to look at what is the relationship between this person with a disability and the people around them. We're going to find what capacities the person has, not starting with their weaknesses, but with their strengths. Finding opportunities in the community where they can interact. Create a vision for the future for this person. Support the person over time, and then work on organizational change so that the person will have embedded support. Okay? Next, we have family characteristics. There are issues with parents, there are early childhood issues, sibling issues, planning issues, adult issues, people with developmental disabilities as parents. There's a really delightful poem called Welcome to Holland, and I'm not going to read that to you. I'll put the link up so that you can read that for yourself, but it's really sweet. Family-centered practices. We want to look at the learning and development of the person as being a function of the opportunities that the person has had to learn as a child, the supports the parents have in being able to parent a child with special needs, and then the family and community resources that assist both the child and the parent. So that is what we look at when we look at environmental